they are two separate religions, but because of their high controlling nature, they have a lot of similarities. In most cases, you cannot be found with the Bible if you're a Muslim. It's a very serious offense. Jehovah's Witnesses is basically a corporation. It was an organization that was done by somebody who was a genius. And a lot of things that they've been taught have actually been lied.
Today we're speaking with Dr. Kennedy. He holds multiple PhDs as a pastor, educator, and global consultant who's worked with organizations like USAID, UNDP, and UNICEF. He's taught thousands about wealth creation and runs a YouTube channel with over 1.5 million views. He challenges religious misconceptions and inspires change around the world. Today we're diving into brainwashing tactics used by high-control religious groups. Dr. Kennedy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You have discovered an interesting similarity between Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses with the strict obedience, the leadership structure, community enforcement, and beliefs. Could you explain those to me?
Yeah, the more I studied both Jehovah's Witnesses and Islam, the more I see actually a lot of similarities, both in terms of theologically. I know theologically they are totally different, but they have similarities even in theology. Also, certain practices, they are quite similar. Basically, there are things that are common to all high control groups. So you find them coming up in almost all of them. And maybe we can begin to go into specifics. But generally, in as much as they are totally different, they are two separate religions, but because of their high controlling nature, they have a lot of similarities.
I do, yes. Why don't we start with strict obedience?
One of the things that you notice with particularly Jehovah's Witnesses is that the governing body has set itself up as a channel through which God speaks. A member cannot claim to speak or to hear from God or to interpret scripture on their own. They have to depend on what the governing body has already published. So you find that level. And then when you go to the Muslims, you will also find that in most cases, they want to refer you to the imams, to the scholars. The last video that I did where I was analyzing debates about Islam, whether Islam is a religion of peace, there was one viewer who was quite, used the harsh language, and he told me, you should have consulted the scholars. So that tendency of the members not being confident enough to be able to start scriptures and be able to defend is what you find quite strange with high control groups. And if you look at the Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, their challenge is that they don't want the members to discover something else because there are a lot of lies and there's a lot of manipulation with the Jehovah's Witnesses. So what you find is that they have to make sure that their members have no access to alternative interpretation, to alternative views. And that's why they've labeled any alternative information or any member who tries to question as an apostate. I think that is the biggest crime amongst the Jehovah's Witnesses. But when it comes to Islam, what I've noticed is that and my biggest challenge with Islam is that it looks like the legitimacy of the Quran is dependent on the faults in the Bible. So now when people begin to get exposed to the scriptures, and Christians also start pointing out, because for a very long time, like Dr. J. Smith says, for a very long time, Christians did not mind about Islam. So Islam went on rampage, tearing apart the scriptures and all that. And because they have been trained to memorize, you'll find that they can spit more scriptures, Bible scriptures, than a Christian can do, So, but because believers are now also coming up and beginning to challenge. For example, they will challenge that the Quran is standard, nothing has been changed. And now they begin to show that actually there are so many variations of the Quran. And because of the internet, which is affecting both Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses, the members are actually getting exposed to real challenges which they cannot explain away. And that's why we are having in both Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses millions of people actually living.
Yep. Why don't we talk about the leadership structure and how they're both set up?
Yeah, in terms of the leadership structure, I'm very, very conversant more with the Jehovah's Witnesses. But in terms of the Jehovah's Witnesses structure, it's very clear. You have the governing body, you have those that are in charge of countries, you have those that are in charge of, overseers. So you have this structure. It's a hierarchy. It's more, they're actually organized like a corporation. It's like you have headquarters, then you have country offices, which they call branch offices. Then at the local level, you have others, those who oversee congregations, and then you have elders. Circuit overseers, then you have elders. So you have that kind of a structure, which is very, very hierarchical kind of structure. And therefore, obedience is very important. It's more like close to, for lack of a better term, a military-like kind of leadership in terms of obedience, because obedience is very much emphasized. Members have to obey the elders have to obey those who oversee them, and everyone has to obey the governing body without actually questioning. Yeah. So that is the challenge with that kind of structure. So there is no flexibility the way we have in a lot of Christian denominations, particularly if you look at evangelicals, where you can have an independent thought, you can ask your pastor, you can challenge your pastor, and you calmly explain to you the scriptures and the challenges that you are having. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, certain questions are no. One viewer of my video said when he was studying for baptism, whenever he would ask questions, they would tell him, we'll answer that one later, we'll answer that one later. And he says, when I got baptized, I was not allowed to ask any questions. So that is in terms of the structure, which is heavy top, and the leaders have all the authorities, and the leaders claim that God speaks to them. And whenever a person says God speaks to them, it's very difficult to challenge them. Even in other Christian denominations, for example, those that are more like in a prophetic ministry, or those that claim I'm an apostle, God has called me, God told me this. And most when people start using that language, they began to start controlling people, because now members can't question. Because once you question, you are actually questioning God himself. So that is the challenge with the kind of leadership structure that is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for the Jehovah's Witnesses, it is necessary for their survival, because without such a structure and without being controlling, I don't think the Jehovah's Witnesses can survive.
Yep. Well, and that brings me to the topic, was the community enforcement beliefs.
When they are going around, they are very strategic. Sometimes we think that they just want to argue, they are looking for somebody, they just want to talk to everybody. They are after specific people. And the people that they are after are basically many those who have very little Bible knowledge or no knowledge at all, because then they can direct them in whatever direction they want. And then they are looking for those who are going through serious emotional problems, some may be drug addicts, those people that have existential problems. They're wondering, this world is so bad. And if you look at even their material or their theology is directed towards how evil this world is. Because when you listen to them, you'd think there is no iota of anything good. So when they find those people who are at the verge of life in a crisis of some sort, or they are beginning to question, they need certainty, they need a structure. Those are the kind of people they are looking for. Of course, the majority of them are their own children who are born in the Jehovah's Witnesses. But the outsiders, those are the ones that they are looking for, people with identity crisis issues. So when they get them, then they love bomb them. And when they love bomb them, then the people say, I have found the right place. I've found people. And then they begin to teach them the materials that they use, what they call Bible study, is actually an indoctrination process, which begins with generic topics. There's section 1, section 2, up to 4. But when you start going to section 2, they start becoming more specific. And and start showing that other churches are not, even the language changes from God to Jehovah. So now when a person is brought in now and now is baptized, then they have to follow the rules, because for you to be baptized and go through that process, so by the time a person is getting baptized, that one is properly indoctrinated. And they believe that God, the governing body, are actually speak through God. And because they would have, these are people who would have had no Bible knowledge. So everything they are being taught, they take it as a gospel truth. But now, when they are in the congregation, they have to monitor each other. It's very difficult to trust anybody because they might just report you. If you are watching something, the friends, they will report you. So they police each other, and that is just to justify that you have to follow certain rules. If you don't follow Jehovah and the rules and the governing body, then when Armageddon comes, you are actually going to be destroyed. So that is the enforcement that takes place there. It's really, they actually policed. Like somebody said, it's very difficult to trust anybody in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Do you think some people are more susceptible to religious brainwashing?
About 75% of the members having been born from Jehovah's Witnesses families. So which means only 25%, if that statistic is correct, is are outsiders who are not in the Jehovah's Witnesses. But I strongly believe there are people who are susceptible to Jehovah's Witnesses or to brainwashing. If there is a person who has serious emotional problems, like they are at the verge of falling off, maybe they even want to commit suicide, they have no purpose, no meaning in life. And when the advantage that Jehovah's Witnesses have is because they provide a black and white kind of theology. So they will explain why problems happen, and they will show them how good God is, and how that certain things that happen do not come from God. So those people who need structure, those people who need some sort of assurance, certainty, are actually more susceptible. And particularly when people are emotionally vulnerable. I'm sure you have noticed that sometimes Jehovah's Witnesses look for people, maybe you've just lost a loved one. I have seen some videos of where somebody lost a child and then they show up with some pamphlets about seeing their child in paradise. So they actually capitalize on the vulnerability of people. So people who are vulnerable, you are vulnerable, and then you have little Bible knowledge, you are actually likely to be, you may end up actually becoming a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. There's lots of tactics that they use. One of the things I wanted to highlight that I kept hearing people say is fear of rejection, shame, losing the family. Can you break those apart for me a little bit too?
Yeah. So basically, what happens with the Jehovah's Witnesses is that the way it's been created is the theology and the practice is to make people feel inadequate. It's like they're not doing enough. That's the fuel they use. And that's why a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, if not most, are so bent out, because they still need to practice. They have to do certain things to please Jehovah. And remember that for them, Jehovah and the organization are actually conflated. They're almost one and the same. I've done videos about who Jehovah's Witnesses worship. And when you look at that, you realize that if you critically look at it, Jehovah's Witnesses actually worship the organization. Of course, they think they're worshiping God, but they've taken up that responsibility, because serving God means serving the organization. Worshiping God means you have to do it through the organization. Giving to God means giving to the organization. So God and the organization are actually conflated. That's the challenge. So they create this inadequacy where members are always feeling they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough because if I don't do enough, when Armageddon comes, I am going to be destroyed. So that's what also creates the sense of guilt that I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough. But it's good for the organization, because then it creates the fuel for people. Because for me, as far as I'm concerned, looking at the analysis, the Jehovah's Witnesses is basically a corporation. It was an organization that was done by somebody who was a genius. especially the guy who took over Joseph Rutherford. He was more of a genius than even Rousseau, because what they've done, they've actually created a corporation to create a lot of money using religion. And the members think that they're serving God, but they've actually been recruited for free labor because they have to contribute money, they have to contribute labor. A lot of them, those that work full time, they are paid very little. There was one person who was working in the Australian branch who said he was getting 5% of a daily wage. So that is the challenge. So on one hand, they make people feel inadequate and then feel guilty because you are not doing enough. And if a person starts doubting, the solution is just do more for Jehovah. Now, when shunning is actually their ultimate purpose, that's why I don't believe that even if they've made some adjustment to it, they will really overhaul it. Because if they overhaul shunning, then they'll lose their power, because that's what holds people inside. People are there. A lot of people are there. A lot of PMOs, physically in but mentally out, are there. But because they are afraid that should they leave, they'll lose their family. Because there's even a chance that if let's say a husband leaves, stops believing, the wife, it's not uncommon for the wife to divorce the husband. And the fear is that when Armageddon comes and you are with a husband who is not believing with the children, you may be destroyed together. There's a video that I was watching about, which was done by Nav Sang, a gentleman who talked about how his brother committed suicide because he felt he was so inadequate, his soul was so dark, and he felt that if Armageddon comes and he finds him with the children will be killed together with him, because him as a father was not spiritually strong. Therefore, he committed suicide. And if a person can go to the extent of killing himself, then you know that this is a very, very, very serious disease, the kind of doctrine that you have with the Jehovah's Witnesses. So a lot of people are afraid of leaving, because then they will totally, and most of them, you find that their friends are Jehovah's Witnesses. Their relatives are Jehovah's Witnesses. So if you leave, you are totally by yourself. And so that's why shunning is a very, very powerful weapon. Yeah.
Why do you think people are leaving? I had highlighted a few things: women's freedom, poverty, the strict rules. They want hope and forgiveness. We talk about the underground church movement, social media, and spiritual dreams. So, what do you think is the biggest reason why people are leaving, are becoming ex-Muslim and ex-Jehovah Witnesses?
If we start with the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Jehovah's Witnesses' biggest enemy was actually COVID. I'm not saying people are not living before, but COVID, that's when they were more adversely affected. And the reason is simple. They keep people busy. They have to constantly be on the move. They're attending weekend worship meetings in the kingdom halls. They are going for field service. They are volunteering. They are having family Bible studies, and they have students they have to teach. So they are quite busy. And because they are kept busy, they have no time to sit and think and reflect. They are so exhausted. Like in my country here, it's rare to find a Jehovah's Witnesses who looks like Joyf. They look like, some sort of absent-minded. I think they are overwhelmed and too tired. And because of that, during COVID, that reinforcement was disrupted. So they were not having meetings as they normally have. And then they started having meetings online, which the governing body, the governing body says that the internet is of the devil. So when they started having that, the people started straying and started watching what they call posted materials. And then some started realizing, but this is true. Like something that somebody has been wondering about, and then all of a sudden somebody speaks about it and openly they see it. So that disruption, and then having too much access to information. And of course, there are a number of people, the ex-JWs, and some of us whom they call opposers who have never been ex-JWs. So the information that we provide, and the issues that they watch. And because they watch, and we know they watch because they comment. Of course, they use the the YouTube ID, so no one would know who this person is. So that is the challenge. But the same thing has happened to Muslims in the sense that if you're in some countries, in most cases, you cannot be found with a Bible if you're a Muslim. It's a very serious offense. But with the internet, it provides so much privacy that people are able to, go online. They can be able to contact somebody. They can be able to chat. And one of the prominent things that has happened, especially in the Islamic world, is the issue of Muslims having the dreams about Jesus. The stories are numerous. They have a dream of Jesus, and then Jesus tells them, "Follow me," and they have to go looking for a Christian to explain, and they have to do it privately. I read about 10 theological students, Islamic theological students, and all the 10 had the same dream about Jesus, and they didn't know what to do. So the writer says they kidnapped a Christian missionary to go and explain to them about Christianity. So the issue of the internet, of course, you have satellite TV, which has existed for quite a long time. It has impacted a lot. These are the things that actually been opening up, in the sense that these are people who have been in an enclosure. The information has been restricted, but now information is on the fingertips. So that's what I think has affected them quite a lot. Of course, there are several other things like the hypocrisy of the governing body, the change in the doctrines, which they are calling new light. And one of the things that has been the biggest problem is the overlapping generation, the 1919 doctrine, which totally now doesn't even make sense, because everything, all the prophecies, all the doctrines that were based on the 1914, 1919 doctrines have flopped. So, and that's what is affecting people. The failed prophecies have also been a major impact on people living.
Yeah, time-stamped religion. It's very bizarre. I've heard people talk about past truths, present truths, and future truths. And it's like they just rewrite it every time.
In fact, most critical thinkers don't stay very long in the Jehovah's Witnesses, because at the back of the mind, if you read a lot, there's just this thing subconsciously where the mind at night subconsciously is processing the information, and you just feel this feeling that something doesn't just add up. And the more they try to investigate, the more they actually even open the Pandora box. So it's a question now where the problem is if it's a married couple and then one wakes up, because they say waking up, which means the rest are asleep. So when one wakes up, then it means now the challenge is the fear that if I leave, I may lose my family. But some are lucky because they end up waking up at the same time. But those who are actually critical thinkers, and some of them have actually made comments on my channel to say, I question the elders. And somebody recently said, I asked the elder something. It was the last time he talked to me. And so you have that kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have another interview set up. I'm not sure 100% if it will go through because sometimes last minute people cancel, but he's actively involved in the Jehovah's Witness community. And he messaged me and was wondering how I could do a video with him, remaining anonymous, because he said he's physically in, but mentally out. And he's going through this process right now of trying to figure out, how do I do this? What would you say to someone like that individual who I might speak to that's still physically in but mentally out?
Yeah. So those think one of the key issues, if they know somebody or if you can connect them to somebody who was in the truth and has come out, he will be very, very helpful to such a person, because then they know they've gone through it, they know what they've experienced. It will be able to help them. Now, the biggest challenge are for the kids who are still under they're still under their parents, and I've seen a lot of them actually saying, "I am tired. I don't want," and you find those who have been there advising them to say, "No, no, 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 don't rush. Just young. make sure you get the education, get the trade, and then at a certain point, when you're independent, then you can leave. But the person who is inside, the first thing they need to know, like I've said, can they talk to somebody who has been there before and has come out? They will give them quite some insight. And also they need to count the cost. What is it that they're willing to lose if they come out? And they need to weigh that. But I think they can't stay there forever, because I think it's more of a big problem to be living a lie, because you don't believe in something anymore. And then the other thing also is what I've seen as a problem is that a lot of them, when they leave, they become atheists, which is going to another extreme from believing. And they just need to know that the very fact that they found that what they believed in was false is a sign that they can search for something that is true, that there's something that is actually true. And a lot of things that they've been taught have actually been lies, because the governing board and the leadership actually lies. It lies about other Christian denominations. They don't laugh. They don't even read the Bible. And somebody goes to a church and finds that they actually read the Bible than they do, because for them, they are busy referring to the awake, to the watchtower. The watchtower says this. Rarely you hear them saying the Bible. They'll say the watchtower says this. So that's the challenge. And that's what I would advise a person to do. They need to count the cost. They need to plan their exit properly. And if they can find the easiest way of getting out, mainly disassociation rather than being shunned or removed, as they say. Because one of the fun things is like the women, so you have the young people, but the women, you find that some of them, to come out, they end up committing adultery just as a way of leaving their husbands. And you know that even their courtship and the dating is monitored. So, like one ex-JW was saying, he said, you just get married for sex, because they're so controlled. You don't have an opportunity to be able to date freely, and if you don't like a person, you break up. For them, it's a problem. So some women end up committing adultery, because that's the only scriptural basis for Jehovah's Witnesses for a divorce. So they go into something they don't even believe in, but to run away from their husband. So that's the challenge.
That's an interesting point, what you brought up in both religions about women's freedom, because women are very much to be obedient and submissive. And I feel a lot of women are just getting tired of it.
In fact, I think for the Muslims, it is even worse, because in the first place, they would be 4 of them to 1 man, and they are in a society, especially if you are even in an Islamic country. So you literally cannot go. You are dependent on a man. I think on that front, even the Jehovah's Witnesses are better off because they may be in a relatively free country where they wouldn't go through the persecution that the women go through. And if a woman committed adultery like a Jehovah's Witness would do, in some countries they would be stoned to death. So it's actually even more severe for the women. Yeah, so that's one thing that they actually have in common, is this low view of women. But to look at the amount of effort that they play, how, for example, Jehovah's Witnesses, they're witnessing, they are volunteering, but they have literally no say in the church. So that is the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and share your knowledge. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure your message will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, welcome.
Take care.